Go ahead and share my screen real quick. Everything on there?
Yep.
All right. So yeah, we'll go right into it. I'm Alex. I'm a SD-WAN TSA. I cover pretty much all routing on the pre-sale side. Meraki MX routing, IOSXE routing, SD-WAN, pretty much the whole gambit. So these routers are kind of nice because they kind of cover the entire field. But this is the kind of the trends we're seeing right now in networking. And with SD-WAN, we're seeing a lot of AI, support, agentic AI support, self-healing, troubleshooting, stuff like that. We're seeing a lot of interest in single SaaS or vendor SASE solutions as well. And then we're also seeing a lot of interest in like multi-cloud connectivity, which is router support, and then the platform standardization, which is something that Cisco's been kind of focused on. The routing BU has just kind of gotten to this. The switching and the wireless guys are a little bit ahead of us, but the idea behind these new routers is to focus everything onto one single hardware platform that you can then choose later on at the time of purchase. Do you want to have it run in Meraki mode or IOSXE mode? So these are what the routers kind of look like from high level, and then I'll get into the specific feature sets. The big item from these is going to be the PQC, which I'll talk about in the next couple slides, which is basically the hardware platform has these post-quantum cryptography chips built in, and then we're catching up with software. So initially, which I'll go over in the PQC section, is what we have today and what's coming up on in the next version of the software, and then how these are actually useful. Like, what does post-quantum actually mean? Like, it's a buzzword, but I kind of go into a little bit about what it actually supports and what it's trying to prevent. These routers being a newer iteration, they have much faster chips. They're built for the next generation firewall feature set and for increased SASE cooperation with either our own products, Cisco Secure Access, or third-party vendors as well. And they're just designed to push a lot more throughput. They have ThousandEyes built in, which is kind of neat. So pretty much all the platforms have the ability of running ThousandEyes right from the get-go, and some other AI tools that go along with that. The big item I'll cover at the end is they're going to be covered in the iOS 6 as general is going to be in the dashboard for these routers. So the previous generation, the Catalyst 8Ks are not going to be in the Meraki dashboard, but these new routers, they all will be, although they're going to be released in phases. And I'll talk about what those look like. And then we kind of basically simplified the licensing a lot as well. So on these routers, there's no more bandwidth tiers. There's no more HSEC license. Each platform basically exists, whether it's small, medium, large, or extra large. And then you basically pick whether you want to have an advanced feature set or an essentials feature set for SD-WAN. And then if you just want to do regular routing, we have a routing advantage. That's basically it with these platforms.
Yeah. And Alex, just to kind of recap that, you buy one device, you choose what type of management style you want, rather it be just like Catalyst or Dashboard. And then if you want to go Dashboard, will that be iOS XE or will that be Meraki?
Yep. So these are platforms. I don't have a side on, so I probably should add it after the fact. But there's like basically 4 ways you can manage these devices. You can manage them via the SD-WAN manager, which can do regular SD-WAN and regular routing. You can manage them via the Catalyst Center as well, I believe. Although you're not going to be able to get as many of the advanced features that the SD-WAN manager has, but they're there. You can, and then upcoming is going to be being able to manage these by the Meraki dashboard as well, which is probably going to have a similar feature set to what the SD-WAN manager provides, which is full lifecycle management, configuration, all that type of stuff. Everything you kind of see right now with the switches in Meraki dashboard.
Okay,
And
so
then
if
the
you're looking
fourth
for
one, of
like one
course,
big platform,
yep.
put it in Dashboard. If you want to just focus on just like that SD-WAN piece, maybe you just only focus on the route piece, you still have that SD-WAN manager.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And then of course you can manage them through CLI. We're never taking that away. But yeah.
As many people still do.
So these are the main use cases that this router supports. Again, since it's like an evolution, these are the biggest routers that we support on the enterprise side that run iOS XE. So anything larger than this is usually when you start going into the service provider side, ASR 9000 series, that type of stuff, iOS XR. But these can function as like an MPLS CPE. They can do overlay VPNs, all different kinds, EVPN, layer 3 VPN, all the good stuff. They of course support SD-WAN. Um, they could run threat protection, which is what we call the next generation firewall suite, which I'll get into in a little bit, built in on the routers themselves. Um, it's very similar to what the FTDs or the secure firewalls can run. And then this August, that's going to be even enhanced even further when we take the code base that the FTDs are running and basically put it in the routers as well. So that's coming in a future release where it's basically right now the security stack on the routers and the firewalls is slightly different. It's like mostly the same, but it's like 95%. There's a 5% delta. So there's some features like EVE that are not available on the routers that are going to become available in August.
Really?
Yes. Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know encrypted visibility engine was going to be in there. I thought it was a hardware thing, so it's cool to know. If you're not familiar with encrypted visibility engine, it's one of my favorite things. Mainly because it came to me when we were in an audit, and we passed the audit, by the way. But we were in an audit, and I was going through everything, and they were talking to me, asking me questions, and I realized everything they were asking me was under the idea of our traffic being decrypted. And I was like, well, what do we do about encrypted traffic? And nobody in the audit ever asked me, like nobody ever in the audit ever asked me, how are you protecting yourself with encrypted traffic that could be malicious? So what encrypted visibility engine does is it actually fingerprints that traffic so that you can say, hey, is this malicious? Is this not malicious? And it uses that signature from the hello packet. And we have a huge database of that. So it's able to bring those feeds and intels so you can actually say, hey, if this is malicious, if this is critical, and there's like different configurations that you can do with that. So it's really cool to see how like the evolution of the secure router is becoming really like a full firewall, a full SD-WAN appliance, a full router appliance, and just one device. Also great for brownfield. But
Yep. Yep. You got it. Yep. The secure networks, basically supports FIPS, compliance, stuff like that for the government, of course. It also can act as an internet gateway. It can hold, some of the large routers can hold like 8 million routes, which is more than enough for one table and then some. And then, of course, it also can act as like a cloud edge. So you can sit on the edge of a data center and interact with like, express routes or direct connects and that type of stuff as well. Slide. The reason it's able to do some of this is some of the innovation is we basically had two main objectives is for this launch was the secure networking processor, which basically increases the amount of like the data plane throughput that we can support on it, specifically when it comes to hardware acceleration for the crypto. Again, making the chips better, making them faster. And then the increased I/O is the other part. So like we had a complaint we had of the previous the Catalyst 8000 series was there was not a lot of options when it comes to different I/O connections. So we've increased that on this. So some of the routers you'll see support UE by default, support mgig by default, and then have 25 gig connections as well. So there's a more wide variety of connections for these routers. The first thing I want to go into is the post-quantum cryptography. So like kind of basically what this is and what it means. These routers are going to be considered post-quantum crypto capable and safe. But again, software, the hardware is there, the software is catching up. So I'll talk about like what phases comes, what's available at launch right now today, and what's going to be available next month when the next version of code ships. So just to kind of go through it, what post-quantum cryptography can, what it is the idea that right now the key exchange in a regular PKI infrastructure using RSA is vulnerable to quantum computing. So the idea is if an attacker is able to capture that session when you do the PKI, you do the RSA check where you verify their public key with your private key, that type of stuff, that key exchange. If that is captured, they're going to be able to potentially generate the session key here that you use, to send data right between the different endpoints. So usually this happens first, and then once you verify each other with your private public key pair, then you generate a session key, and then that's what you actually encrypt the session data with. Usually AES-256, something like that. If they're able to capture this part at the top, they're going to be able to generate the session key at the bottom. So that is why this is becoming a big concern, because it leads to a couple different attack vectors for this. So the one big one is the harvest now, decrypt later, which is if you have data, open out there, and someone's just basically collecting it. When the quantum computer becomes more economically feasible and it's much more applicable, or they have one, then they can sit there and go back to your data, and as long as they have the full conversation, they're going to be able to break that session key and be able to decrypt the data. And that's simply a factor because quantum computing is really good at breaking the specific type of math that the private public key pair for RSA provides. Yep. So that's basically, this slide kind of covers exactly what I talk about. The idea is a bad actor could generate this key right here in the beginning, the private key, during that key exchange, and they're able to get the session key. So that's basically what this is designed to thwart. So I talked about the harvest now decrypt later, which is when you're able to go back to the previous data that you have collected and basically decrypt it. There's a couple of different other attack vectors as well. There's the authentication part, that's verifying the authenticity for users and stuff like that. And the other part is the secure boot, which is verifying the integrity of the software and the hardware. So all three of these are going to be considered attack vectors that these routers are designed to solve. And it's usually because mathematically and theoretically these have been proven to be capable of taking place. It just hasn't happened just yet because quantum computing is still, it's in the labs, but every country, a lot of organizations like Google have their own quantum computing at this point, so it's only a matter of time.
And attacks are just getting more and more like sophisticated, and the devices at the edge. So it's like if you have your device at the edge, it's there, it's vulnerable. Please shut ports you're not using. But
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So another big aspect of this is NIST has passed standards on this, which is what we're complying with in some of these and the later slides I'll get to. But NIST has already passed rules and stuff saying, hey, you need to be quantum, you need to protect your stuff by 2030. So that's been the impetus behind this.
Cisco's still following NIST.
Yep. So right now today, what we have is the post-quantum pre-shared key method. So that is the idea of, in that previous slide I showed with the session key, you basically add a pre-shared key along with that, and that kind of salts the connection, or salts the hash for the key, so it can't be decrypted later. So even if they're able to break the RSA PKI key exchange, they're not going to be able to generate the full session key because they're going to be missing this pre-shared sheet part. That's available today. It's been around for a while. It still suffers from, you have to get the key to both ends, right? It's a pre-shared key method, so it's kind of clunky in that way. But the new method that's coming out, that's verified, it matches RFC. I forget which one it's called, but it matches an RFC and it's NIST compliant. Is the native post-quantum cryptography. This is where it dynamically exchanges the session key, this extra key method over a channel. So, and this will be available. I know it says February, but it's actually in March because the code got pushed back 1 month. It's going to be available next release of code for all these different VPN technologies. So MaxSec will be able to support this, DVPN, FlexVPN, everything, even SSH. So you'll be able to actually use native post-quantum cryptography, in the software. And that's, again, because of the fact that we have the hardware already built in. This is kind of what it looks like, this overview. So this goes over the RFC record. I don't want to get too much into it, but like it follows RFC 9370, which is like an IPv2 post-quantum key exchange. Talks about like the different, the main algorithm is this Crystal's Kyber, the MLKM. That's been the FIPS 203 model that we're kind of following. It has a bunch of math, model lattice-based encryption mechanism standard. I don't know how much any of that works, but that's what it's kind of using to set up this safe quantum tunnel that even if someone is encrypting it the entire time, they're not going to be able to go back and decrypt it. Again, this will be available next month, 2 weeks, I think.
Which will be great if you're following SIMC. They would love to see that.
So another thing I should know is this will be available for autonomous mode, so regular routing. It's not going to be available just yet for SD-WAN. It's probably going to come later this year, so probably August or sometime after that. So now I can get into the actual specific devices. Just now, again, I got the quantum stuff out of the way. So we kept the same naming scheme that we had for the Catalyst routers. We just filled in some extra SKUs and then add in some extra parts. We changed the name from Catalyst to Secure Routers the same way we added just the secure moniker in front of the firewalls marketing employee. It seems like, so everyone
Kinda.
knows that these routers can do firewall stuff and stuff like
Exactly.
that. Yeah.
Yeah. At first, when I
But
first saw it, I was like, okay, secure router, everything's secure. I thought it was just like a marketing thing. But then I realized, like, oh no, it's going to be an actual full firewall. Like, you
yeah,
don't need both devices.
yeah. So like we had that stuff before in the Catalyst routers. It's just we didn't have some of the post quantum stuff. So that's the new stuff, the post quantum, faster chips. But we've had the ability of running next generation firewall on the routers for some time. Um,
Yeah, but the Cisco Security Cloud stuff is where it kind of gets
yeah,
cool.
it is. So the first SKU is the 8100. This is new completely. This is replacing our ISR 1Ks. So these are desktop fanless, single external power supply routers. And I'll get into what those SKUs look like in a second. But these are our, type of routers that sit on a desk. Maybe has a couple printers attached to it, and that's it. Um, small office form factor. The medium branch is the 8200. This existed on the Catalyst series. We just added a couple SKUs and added some extra ability. So some of these models in here are going to be fanless as well than desktop form factor like the 8100. But there's one model that's a regular rack mountable router. A 19-inch fits in a standard rack mount. The large branch that existed before as well with the 8300. We added some extra SKUs in there as well, some options. Big thing about these routers is that most of them have PIM modules built in. So that's something different than the previous 82s and 83s was they didn't have any PIM modules built in. You had to actually add that after the fact. On these routers, they'll have the slot available. So you can just plug it in and take advantage of LTE or 5G.
Sheesh.
Yep. The new one is the new uh, item in this one is the campus one, which is the 8400. This was initially designed because we had customers who wanted routers that were larger than the branch router, the 8300, but still smaller than the data center router. These campus routers offer a couple different connectivity options, and they're basically just made as a good fit in for these. They don't really have that much difference in terms of pure IPsec throughput than the 8500, but these routers offer the ability of running the next generation firewall stack. They don't have as high of a Ceph throughput as 8500, but they have pretty good performance capabilities. But that's something I'll talk about when I get to the 8500s in a second. These routers they exist today as well. They were in the previous scheme. We just refreshed them. These routers are, as I mentioned before, meant for very high throughput, high Ceph throughput, high amounts of routes being retained. They don't run the next generation firewall stack. They can run the next generation firewall, but they can't run the IPS, the IDS. That's the only router that can't do that out of this bunch. And again, that's because when you're talking about the scales that the data center require, we usually recommend like your own separate firewalls.
Exactly.
Yep. So just some items. Again, I kind of talked about they had the secure networking processor, which is increase our data plane and encryption throughput. We have fanless models now across the small, medium, and large, which is nice. Gives us more options and more places to deploy it. We added some 25 gig connectivity as well on some of the models, specifically 84. The secure boot, that's something that I didn't talk about too much, but that's something that's coming future in the software. Again, it's that idea that you can protect the software and hardware from being counterfeit. Right now, the 8100, 83, and 84 have that built in. We're just waiting for the software to catch up. Another big feature is the dying grasp. So that is when the device is about to lose power and it's able to send a specialized packet to say, hey, I'm about to lose power. So you know if the router went down versus if it was a circuit issue or something like that. That's something that's been popular on the service router side for quite a while, and they're bringing it into the enterprise side. And then MGig, which is some of these models are going to have the ability of doing 1, 2.5, and 5 gigs of copper throughput, which is pretty prevalent in like the prosumer market right now. And it's something we were missing on a lot of these platforms. It was available a lot in the switches, but now we're bringing it on the routers to basically condense everything into one box. This is kind of what the core security platform kind of looks like. This kind of has our SASE in the middle, or as it at the end. But the idea is like everything in the top middle here is what the routers can actually do, and they all support the same features, except as I mentioned, the 8500 can't do the IPS or the AMP. This stuff in the middle here. But They they support the next generation firewall, layer 3 through 7 application matching. The 81 through 84 support the IPS, AMP, sandboxing for our threat grid. This is something that's going to be revamped a little bit, as I mentioned earlier in August. That these features, again, they're very comparable to what's in firewall today, but they're going to be exactly the same source code in August. Sandboxing is pretty neat because that is the ability, if it detects something in AMP and it sees malware, or it sees a file that doesn't know what the signature is, it'll send it up to the cloud and then have it analyzed by Cisco Threat Grid, and then it'll come back with a result, and that'll tell the router whether or not it's malware or whether it's safe to pass through. URL filtering as well is pretty popular. We use Talus for the backend database for that, but you can make your own whitelists, blacklists, all different types of abilities to customize what categories you want to have for what URL traffic goes through or what traffic goes through the router. And then of course we support the TLS decryption as well. Now,
So
sorry, go on, Eric.
no, you go into the SSC. I got a question after that.
Yeah, so like I know I decided with the SSC part, but this is Cisco Secure Access supports all of these, but the idea is if you combine both of these, the cloud part, which is here, and then the on-prem firewall here, you get the whole SASE picture, the whole SSE model, which is where it's a mix of being able to do stuff on-prem versus the cloud. How I see a lot of customers utilize this is it's not one or the other. They tend to pick one depending on the type of traffic. So for the corporate traffic, they're more willing to send it out to the cloud, for CASB or firewalls as a service or DLP, which is usually a pretty big one. And then for like maybe a guest Wi-Fi via ref, they're more likely just to use the URL filtering that's on the box, and then just have it, go out to the DIA, get added and go out to the DIA circuit. So it's one of the scenarios where you see a lot of customers mix and match these features, right? They'll do some stuff on prem because it's inexpensive traffic. They don't want to send it to the cloud. It's just like guest Wi-Fi traffic, and then other traffic, the more important corporate traffic, they'll send to the cloud to get a much more thorough scrubbing, and with the additional feature set that the SSE provides.
So that's exactly what my question, like you segued into it perfectly. Just not to put you on the spot, but I know you work with tons of people all along the East Coast. I know there's still a lot of customers who are running like DWDM rings or internal rings or DMVPN, or they have like different infrastructure and they're not necessarily SASE. They haven't like picked a SASE vendor or single SASE vendor, or they're still doing a mix of all different types of things. But most of their traffic's kind of internal. With everything moving to the cloud as far as services go, like Microsoft 365, Office 365, Teams, WebEx, yeah, all etc. List goes on. Do you ever see people go from an architecture, like being able to leverage the secure routers to go from an architecture that where they have the SD-WAN or routing internally, but they're able to get themselves like SASE ready?
Yeah, so that's kind of what we see a lot of customers use it for in terms of a transition. They'll upgrade their routers, they'll either refresh their existing SD-WAN or they'll move to an SD-WAN solution, and then they'll still backhaul the traffic, or maybe they'll do a little bit of the on-prem features at the site. And then as they expand internet connectivity to all their branches to kind of replace MPLS, they'll take more and more advantage of the firewall features that are on the box. And then once they start moving into like zero ZTNA, zero trust, they have more remote users that they want to connect in. That's when they start moving into the SSC part as well and get the full SASE. So that's where it doesn't really matter where you are as a user, whether you're at a branch behind a router or whether you're at a Starbucks with your laptop. The user experience is the exact same. That way you can have remote users connect to the SSC environment,
Yeah.
secure access, for example, and then they're going to have the exact same experiences if they were behind a router at a site.
So today I have MPLS, I have a router, I have a firewall. My first step is getting secure router because it's both
Mm,
routing my traffic as I am today internally, and then starting to get off of that. As I get off my circuits and get into SD-WAN fabric, I can move towards that direction. Then once I'm
yes.
in SD-WAN, I want to go into the SSC portion. Now I'm full SASE. So it's kind
Yes.
of a journey, but this is kind of like that pivot point.
Yep. And the idea is like, because the big dividing line is like once you start once you start adding internet circuits to all your branch sites, you've expanded the security perimeter, which is why these features at the top here are very important. for the router, and you're going to be backhauling less traffic to your data center. So the advantage of that is you're not going to need a giant firewall stack at your data center or your head end that costs a lot of money. That's where all the bottleneck is. It's one place you have to focus on, so that's nice. But with SD-WAN and the automation that provides, you're able to still get that single management dashboard of the whole um, environment. But instead of having it be in one set of devices at one place, it's kind of spread across your whole network.
Cool.
The other thing I'd throw in there, I know we're not going deep into the SASE world, but a lot of my customers have started to explore that option because it reduces attack vectors from an RAVPN standpoint. So in addition to simplifying the overall architecture, it also hardens it a bit. If that's something anybody's interested in, talk to your SE. We can always go a little bit deeper on that conversation for you.
Yep. And just to give you guys an idea of these routers aren't just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. Like we do go through like open third-party companies that test the efficiency and efficacy of these routers as well. So we had the A300s, which is, again, they run the same software as the other ones, go through a NetSec Open evaluation. And, the IPS was, scored at 99, and then, the malware was scored at 99.7. So they're very good. We always get consistent good remarks on these devices in terms of their throughput and their ability to, detect malware. So it's not something where we just have a shoddy next generation firewall on there, but, and just call it a day. These devices are just as efficient as a regular firewall. And the big change over that was announced at Cisco Live last year was the addition of security cloud control. So this dashboard is basically a one-stop shop for everything security for the entire enterprise portfolio. So whether you buy a secure router, a Meraki device, a secure access switches or SSE, or you get into the secure firewall business, you'll get entitlement to go into the security cloud control dashboard. And what this is it's a dashboard that kind of lets you merge all these different products together. So you can rate one security policy on this dashboard in SCC, and it'll transmit that policy down to the SD-WAN environment, to the Meraki side, to the secure access, and to the firewall side. So the idea behind this is you have one SASE dashboard basically, where you write one security policy and you don't have to translate that yourself into all these different products. It does it for you from this main interface. And these routers are compatible with this. So the idea behind this basically is, you can plug these routers in, you can manage them through the SD-WAN manager, for their security components, or you could manage them through the security cloud control as part of a wider holistic deployment. Right? If you had an environment that had all these different components, you could manage them all via one dashboard.
Yeah, I want to stop on that. It's actually a really good point because it's really cool. A lot of people have like infosec teams and they have like route networking teams. With SASE, it's like, well, how do I split responsibilities? What's cool about the SD-WAN manager is if you're in there, you have all your devices, you can and you connect it to Cisco Security Cloud Control. Only one of them, like the Security Cloud Control, is the parent. So when you're in SD-WAN manager, you're just looking at it from Security Cloud Control. So the network team can focus on the SD-WAN portion, and your infosec team could be in Cisco Security Cloud Control, make all their changes, and they're always in sync. So it allows that delineation if that's how you're structured in your organization.
Yep.
No split brain.
Correct. Yeah. No. Once you integrate each one of these products with it, especially the manager, basically, you'll see it in there. But if you want to be able to manage the security stuff, you have to go to security cloud control. You can still see it in read-only mode in here, but yeah.
Yep. Another good point. So if there is a firewall thing that you do want to look at, or a policy you want to look at, you can still see it in read only. Screenshot it, send it to your security team. Say, hey, can we make this change? So there's still that flexibility. You're not just blind to it.
Yeah. Then now we can get into the actual router models. These are the two new SKUs that we launched at Cisco Live in the 8500 series, the 8555 and the 8570. You'll see at the end that we have the moniker in the SKUs as the G2. that references the fact that the Catalyst 8000s was kind of considered Gen 1. So any of the new routers that you see that have a G2 marker at the end, you know that it's a new router that was released under this new moniker with, the post quantum cryptography, the availability on iOS XE dashboard eventually, and the fact that they're all going to be new. They all got launched within the past year.
And no bandwidth tier.
No bandwidth tier, yeah.
Which people love.
Yeah, so this right at the top was basically a refresh of the 8512X. Same port capacity, 12, 10 gig, 1 gig ports. It's quite a bit of ability on the, how much, I think it can hold like 8 million routes. It's pretty high up there. You can increase the memory on it if you want. I think the default's 32, but it can go up to 64. Same with the 8570. The 8570's got an interesting port combination. This basically a refresh of the 4X, 12X 4QC. So it's got 200 gig / 40 gig ports, 2 dedicated 40 gig ports, and then 12 10 gig 1 gig ports. There's a slight limitation on this where you can't have all this active at the same time. You can basically have active up to like 200 gigs of throughput. So basically that would mean 200 gig ports can be active at once, 100 gig port and like 10 or 12 of the 10 gig ports on the right side, or 3 40 gig ports, or a 100 gig port and 2 40 gig ports, stuff like that. So like we have a slide on that, or it's in our documentation online, but that's something to be aware of. That's the only model that has this, where it's like you can't unlock all these ports all at once. There's a backplane limitation. Yep.
And you're reducing your port count anyways, because you're not going to a firewall.
Correct. Yep. The 8400 series, this is the new platform, the new category that we came in with campus. The 8455 has 8 1 gig ports, 2 10 gig ports, and 2 25 gig ports. Again, it's got no bandwidth tiers. It's pretty high availability in terms of memory. Again, you can adjust the actual memory on the box. You can, I think, upgrade from 32 to 64 on these models as well. They got tamper detection on it, full gambit. The 8475 is a pretty attractive option because it basically gives you almost the exact same performance as the 8500, just a little bit less Ceph, but the actual IPsec performance is very similar. And then it has a different, 4 25 gig ports, 8 10 gig ports, and 8 1 gig ports. So it's got a pretty good mix of connectivity there. The 8300, so this is where you start seeing the modules, right? These are the branch routers, as we call them. The 8355 has everything kind of built in. It's got a PIM on the right side. It's got these 4 10 gig ports here. It's got M gig ports, which are right here on the left side. And then it's got 2 dedicated 1 gig ports, which are here in the middle. So this is a fanless model. You can see it can support 2 external power supplies if needed, or with one, an extra one for PoE. It's fanless, I believe. Yep. And it's, if you need something a little bit more customizable, you can go to the 8375, and that allows you to add in specific modules where you can add in more layer 2 or layer 3 ports, and even can use an expansion port to even add more modules. So this one can support like 3 different modules basically, because there's one right here, and then you can fit 2 in here with an adapter. And then it's got some, 2 10 gig and 4 MB ports available on the box itself here. But if you want to customize it, you can.
What are some customizations you see typically?
You can either get like a giant switch card here on the right, like up to 20 ports, layer 2 ports. So if you want to have a router and a switch in one, that's available. If you want to add some more layer 3 ports, that's what you can add here on this module here. You can add 10 gig or 1 gig connections. And then if you wanted to add, some DSL stuff, some T1 stuff, we still support that as well. You can add that in that module as well. I just want to note this also has a PIM module. You just don't see it. It's on the back, but it is there. So that PIM module is basically where you can add a 5G or LTE adapter in and place a SIM on that, and that's how you can get cellular connectivity on this platform right from the get-go. This model, you can kind of see it up front, with the PIM module. Another big thing you're kind of seeing is we're adding PoE. So on some of these ports, you do see PoE. That's something to keep aware of. So basically, on every version down from here, we do support PoE right on the router as well. The A200, as you see, as we get lower in terms of as we get to the smaller form factors, we get increased numbers of actual router options. This one at the top is like a desktop form factor router. It's got no PIM module, just these routing ports, and that's it. 210 gig, 4M gig, 1 gig ports. This is where you start seeing a delineation between what the LAN and WAN are. So LAN ports are layer 2 ports, LAN or WAN are layer 3 ports. There's something to keep in mind of. We have it documented in our public documentation, like how many ports you get of each, and it's just something to keep in mind of. It's more important for SD-WAN because you can only put transport circuits in WAN and layer 3 ports. So it's just something to keep in mind of when you're scoping out these platforms.
Can I just stop and brag for a second about WebEx? My baby's crying like crazy in the background, and I was like so scared y'all could hear it. So I asked Josh, and he's like, "No, I think we're good."
Yeah,
you
all
do
right.
hear it. I apologize.
Yeah. The 8235 is a slight step up, got a little bit more ports, and then it's got the PIM module built in, which is always nice. Again, all these have no bandwidth tiers, right? You just basically buy the box and whether you want advanced or essentials licensing on it. The 8231 and 35 offer an expansion module. The only big difference I think between these is some PoE options for the built-in ports, but they're very similar besides that. Two models, the 8231 and 8235. I think there's an increase in throughput on these models as well. So even though they look very similar, they still are. There's a decent difference between them.
It's crazy.
And then the last one is the 8100 series. We just released some new routers at Cisco Live this year at Amsterdam. So these ones were released, these ones are released, and I think this one is released as well. So these are a wide swath of options. The VAP and CVAP, these are routers that are for like DSL options, stuff like that. Embedded like XDSL, XGCS PON, that type of deployments. Any router with a 1 in it can run SD-WAN. We have it clearly documented on our site, but just to save time on here, like anything you see with a 1 can run SD-WAN. The ones that don't, they're just meant to be very thin branch routers that can support what you need. So usually for like service routers or like ATM, something where they're not running SD-WAN, they're just very, very thin router out of branch. That's what the use case for these would be.
My main takeaway here is like if you have any configuration, definitely ask your account team because we can probably support it.
Yep. These routers are pretty powerful too, because like even these ones, the 8151 and 8161, they can support 1 gig with all the firewall features turned on in terms of throughput. So these routers are pretty powerful. And what we've seen a lot with this generation of routers is if you were previously in like the 8300 category for the first generation Catalyst, the router that now fits your profile is now an 8200. And then same thing for 8200 versus 8100. So
is that with
routers
replacing your firewall though?
Yes. Yep. So because of the increased performance on it, like we've basically seen, the expansion of the abilities of these boxes in terms of compared to previous generations. So if you were an 8300, as I mentioned before, your equivalent now would be like an 8200.
It's crazy.
So these boxes can push some serious amounts of packets on them. So the next part, this are basically a helpful slide I like to provide to kind of give you like a roadmap, or not roadmap, but like a mapping from what a previous generation of routers were to this one. So this is 2 generations ago. This is the ASR, ISR 1K, and ISR 4K. We'll kind of give you a rough idea of what the equivalent would be. So you can kind of see on here, like if you had an HX ASR router, that would be the 8500. If you had like a regular X, that would be an 8400. Stepping down to like the ISRs and ISR 1Ks and 4Ks, you can kind of see how it maps out the specific models. So this is kind of helpful. So if you have like one of these routers today, like a 4351, you get an idea of like where it kind of maps on the newer routers in terms of feature, port and throughput. Again, these routers are on the left are going to, the throughput's still going to be higher. So like there might be use cases where you want to maybe go from a 4355 back down to an 8100. It just depends on what your use case is. But in terms of class, that's kind of where we've positioned it. And then the code here on the bottom tells you like when it was released on. So the ones in green were released during the summer after Cisco Live. So the first code that they have is 17.15.3. The ones in blue down here were released in the fall last year. So they can their latest the first code that they support is 17.3 or sorry 17.18. And then these ones got announced at Cisco Live last month or this month actually in February, early February. And so they're going to be the first code they support is 26.1. So just something to keep in mind of. This is something that's more important if you're running an existing SD-WAN environment and you wanted to get access to these new routers. You might have to upgrade your controllers first, just because the routers run such new code.
Well, I know we have tools, but is there any public-facing tools for throughput so that you can kind of size?
Yep. We have that stuff. Yep.
I know, but is there anything public-facing?
I mean, besides we have the route selector application web.
Oh, that is public-facing?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought that was ours.
Yeah. It's well, there's two different ones. There's one internal for Cisco and there's one external. So there is a router selector tool that we have externally published.
Okay. And if you could send that to me,
Yep.
and then we'll send it to everybody on the call.
Yep. This next slide covers the last generation, the Catalyst 8000. These are the routers that were released in 2021 and later, or 2020 and later. Again, the idea is the same mapping. So you can see the 8500s up here. The previous versions, they map right nice onto the current 8500s. The 8500L was basically rebranded into the 8400s because, again, to fit that campus model. You see the 8300s here. They pretty much map on one-to-one to the 8300s as well. A2s kind of map onto a little bit of both. And then the ISR 1Ks down here at the bottom map onto the 81 or to the 8100s down here. Just to kind of give you, there's no end of sale announcement yet for these routers in orange on over here, since these are our last generation ones. I don't know when that's going to come, but going forward, if you're in a market for a router, I would look at the newer ones. They're pretty much, it costs the same or if not less than the previous generation. So, we're making it very compelling to look at these new devices.
One of my customers actually I was like, dude, why did I buy that? And I was like, I told you we had the secure routers. And he was like, yeah, but it was brand new. I was like, I don't know what you want me to do.
Yeah. These next couple of slides, I can send this out after the thing. They just basically cover what our published documentations are when it comes to throughput. So green is just regular Ceph. Blue is just IPsec, like VPN or regular point-to-point IPsec. Purple or like magenta is like SD-WAN throughput, and then orange is threat protection, which is usually SD-WAN plus, threat protection turned on to the max. So you can see on these routers, 8131, you can move almost 2 gigs of Ceph throughput. You get like up to a gig of threat protection and then like 1.5 gigs of SD-WAN and IPsec. So these routers are pretty powerful. You can see the numbers go up a lot as you go down as you go up the portfolio, to medium branch to large branch. As you can see in here, like as I mentioned, like there's not that much of a difference between the threat protect or the IPsec throughput for SD-WAN on these 84s versus the 85s. But again, the main difference is you have access to the threat protection, like the next generation firewall, IPS, and stuff like that, whereas you don't have that on the 8500s are, again, they're much more geared towards like edge routing, carry full tables, stuff like that, have a edge of a data center, because that's where this huge IP Ceph throughput comes in. And then we still have a previous generation router in here that was released a couple years ago. So it's the newest one from the previous generation. This will probably get refreshed or announced a refresh at Cisco Live next year, or this year, I should say, in June. But this is currently the biggest enterprise router we offer that runs iOS XE. Anything higher than this, you have to go to the service router side. But like, its throughput or its capabilities are pretty ridiculous. Like 538 gigs of Ceph is pretty good for a router. But yeah, this will probably get refreshed this year. So just keep an eye on that. On that.
This is a commercial, Alex.
Yep, I know. You never know. Someone might want it. And then the last part I want to cover is how these routers are going to fit into the dashboard. So the idea going forward on these devices is we are going to basically bring all the native Meraki features that are in the MX platforms onto iOS XE. So basically in the future, you're going to have an iOS XE router, and then you can decide to plug it into dashboard, and then you're going to be able to take advantage of the Meraki native features in there. So you're not going to have to actually like buy a specific separate Meraki router that has its own code and hardware for it. You're going to have just one router that can basically, run the Meraki feature set on top of the iOS XE feature set. So we're starting that process this year. Again, as I mentioned, the AP and the wireless and the switching BUs have already been kind of ahead of us on that. The 9300 switches have been able to run native in the Meraki dashboard, I think, for over a year now at this point, and we're going to have that ability as well. But the idea behind this is, you're going to be able to get not only a consolidation of platforms, but you're also going to be able to run, iOS XE routers in the dashboard. So if you have an existing Meraki setup and you want to have some of these routers that are more powerful, that have more feature set, you'll be able to run them in the dashboard, manage them, and still get that same advanced feature set.
So a question I got asked the other day when I was in a meeting on site with the customer was, am I going to lose any functionality on SD-WAN if I put them in dashboard?
So the SD-WAN part is still going to be separate. That's still going to be an SD-WAN manager.
Okay.
The only thing that's going to allow you to run these in a dashboard is when you're running it in regular iOS XE, like regular routing code. Yep. So that's basically the choice. Like the future end goal for the BUCs is you have a router, a secure router. It has iOS XE on it. You can either run it in the SD-WAN persona, which gives you Catalyst SD-WAN, what we used to call Viptela, right? And that will be managed by the SD-WAN manager or the vManage, as we used to call it. Or you can run it in regular routing mode, and then you can have it managed by the Meraki dashboard. And then if you decide to do that, you'll have the option of running the Meraki SD-WAN features on top of that as well, in regular iOS XE mode. Yep.
So that's where you get the good old auto VPN.
Correct. That's where auto VPN. And we're going to be launching that this year, actually. So you'll see auto VPN on iOS XE on some platforms at the end of this year.
That's always the second question. Yep. Is it going to support auto VPN?
It will. So again, the idea, I don't want to say too much on the views, but the idea is we're going to be phasing out the ClickOS, right? We're going to try and condense everything into one code base, right? You're just going to have iOS XE that has native Meraki features on it.
Perfect. So it's more that auto VPNs coming to iOS XE.
Correct. Yep. Basically. Yep. So what we're focusing on the first is being able to provide like API or CLI, connectivity options to it. That'll talk a little, and I'll reach that in the next slide. But you can basically put the device in either device configuration or cloud managed mode. So I think I have the next slide on this. Yeah, the cloud mode is basically the dashboard is a single source of truth, and everything's done through the GUI. You can still launch a CLI connectivity option to it, but everything is done through the Meraki dashboard. It's a lot like how the switches are managed today, the newer Catalyst switches, or the 9300Xs and stuff like that. And then there's device mode, which is the CLI is the main source of truth. And then you can access it through the Meraki dashboard, but what's locally on the box is what is considered the main driving part for the config. Again, very similar to what the switches have today. The switches, I think, operate under this exact same mode.
They do. It's so funny how like close to routing you are. That you're like, I think I work at Cisco and they do switching.
Yep. Yep. These are the release phases. So starting, I think, in 26.6 or 26.1.1, they're going to have visibility and troubleshooting features taken on the dashboard for these devices that are running iOS XE. Like you'll be able to onboard them, you'll be able to run some auto VPN and basically be able to monitor them. Later this year in August, we're going to start adding firewall features to them. Like Meraki MXs have their own firewall stack, which again is going to be condensed into that same situation with the secure firewall code. So we're going to have all of our enterprise routing products basically run the same firewall code. So that'll be great. It'll make it a lot easier for upgrades and stuff like that. High availability will be there. VRF and BGP enhancements will be there as well. So QoS, multiple VRFs, BGP enhancements, stuff like that. Early 2027 is when you start seeing some of the SD-WAN features come in. So you have auto VPN in the first phase, but you won't have some of the SLAs and stuff that are built on top of it that make Meraki SD-WAN work. That'll be coming in the release 3 later in 2027. United Firewall, more SASE integration, stuff like that. And then release 4, which I think is going to be after that. Like this stuff here is not really been committed yet. It's just kind of roadmap.
Is this our 2026 or calendar?
This is calendar 2026.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, but this year, I mean, that's the next phase. Like these routers right now are in the next month are going to be available on Meraki dashboard in iOS XE. The idea is all the secure routers will be, but they're just starting with these 3 first because they fit, each, this fits a small branch category,
Most.
this fits a
Yeah.
large, this fits a campus. So these are the ones that are going to be available right away. We demoed these, I think, at Cisco Live in EMEA or Amsterdam. So it looks like a regular MX router in the dashboard. This looks no different. But these are the first 3, and then we're going to be adding devices as we go. So I think they're going to be adding a couple more devices before the end of the year. And I don't want to give too much of a timeline, but I think, before the end of 2027, all of them are going to be in there.
Well, I think the biggest thing here is that it's going to be done before the end of security vulnerability date. It's going to be well baked before the end of security vulnerability date of the 4351s or the 4451s. And
Yep.
so that gives people like who are planning what to look forward to.
Yep.
So we are at time.
And that's my last slide. So, yep.
Perfecto. That's good. So I don't know, Josh, can you speak on next month?
Yeah, I think our plan for next month's tap session is to maybe take a little bit more of a demo-based approach. I know we had a lot of slides today just to get folks acquainted with the idea and kind of talk through at a high level what it would look like. I believe we'll have
It's so
Jamie
different.
kind of going through a little more of a fingers on keyboard type approach, just to bring this to life a little bit further. So look out for that invite. I'd expect us to get that out probably in the next couple of days here, Eric. And folks can then register for that. And like we said throughout the presentation, certainly if there are unique scenarios within your environments, or if you're thinking about, some sort of idea for how you want to transform your environment, let your SE know. We can always get you in touch with Alex here, or just see kind of what questions you have and help you think through it. So,
yeah. Alex, thank you.
Yeah,
Yep.
really appreciate it, Alex.
Yeah, it's good to go through it at least once because it's so different. It's just a different way of thinking. It's all the services are there, and there's been so much focus at Cisco on developing horizontally because we already have so many great products, but it's like how do we develop horizontally to integrate all of these into like one platform, one Cisco, and it does really simplify things.
Yeah, that's
I look forward to next month. Thank you so much, Alex. And just so you know, Alex, it's not you.
I know.
I'm not just gonna spring it on you. By the way, you're doing this next month.
Yeah,
That's fine.
Awesome.
Stop the recording. And yeah, stop the recording. If you have any questions,